unlike managers. So, welcome. My background, I was originally, before I joined the Windows team for Windows Runtime, I was in DPE, Developer and Platform Evangelism. I was a technical evangelist. It sounds exactly like it is. I got paid to go out and preach the good word of Microsoft tech. So I love developers. I used to be a developer myself. I still consider myself a developer. I love writing code. And I'm excited that I'm here to be able to talk to you about Metro-style apps and leveraging existing code. Especially, I've been in the submarine for, a year and a half. It's nice to finally come out. So let me ask everyone in the room, how many people in the room are developers? Okay, that's what I kind of figured. How many people in the room, let's say in the last 6 months, have written more than 100 lines of code? Okay, good. How many of you in the room want to take every single line of code you've ever written, throw it out the window, and start from complete scratch when building Metro-style apps? Oh, there's a couple of you. Interesting. I guess you were doing too much celebration last night. So really, the ultimate key takeaway of this talk, if there's one thing I want you to think about when you leave this, is do less work to get more done. Jeff Atwood, I remember a post that he wrote that I love referring to, that I proudly consider myself a lazy developer. I want to go out and I want to reuse any code that I can find to make my life easier. I want to do less work to get more done. I want to do less work to be able to sell my app faster. I want to do less work so I can get to a prototype quicker, so that way I can iterate and iterate and iterate and make it the best app possible. So what we're going to do in this talk, consider me your tour guide, if you will. We're going to go through and we're going to look at the Windows 8 development platform, but we're going to look at it through the glasses of a developer who wants to reuse existing code. There's a lot of features that are very powerful, but have an impact on our lives as developers reusing existing code. And I want to give you kind of the things that you need to know in the Windows 8 platform around this. So the agenda today, it's really simple. It's about using the breadth of existing code that exists there today. Yes, I am going to say the words, and yes, we are going to use open source code during this talk. Yes, we are going to do live coding, no code on slides, no wimping out like that. It's all live coding that we're going to do in Visual Studio. And we're going to talk about each one of these points individually as we go through the talk. But really, it's going to be lots of tips and tricks you need to know about. Gotchas. I will have demos that intentionally fail, because we all know that writing code never fails, right? So what you'll leave with, examples of reusing existing C#, C++, and JavaScript code. Yes, we're going to be using all three. Have no fear if you don't plan on using all three, because most of the tips and tricks and gotchas we're going to share are applicable to all languages. So when I'm in the C++ writing section, a lot of the things that I'm going to show you apply directly to C# and VB developers as well. As I mentioned, most important things you need to know when reusing existing code, and then throughout it, since I am your virtual tour guide here, I'll be pointing out the monuments as we go and giving you pointers to various other content, sessions, hands-on labs, all that kind of stuff that you can go to dig in. And in great foresight and wisdom, all that stuff has already happened. So luckily, all the sessions are online, so you can go download them and watch them on the plane or in the cab. So 3 types of code use. When I really think about this, I divvy it up into 3 types of code reuse. One is platform features. You can think of this about leveraging the existing code that Microsoft has already written. What's that code that you don't have to write because we've already provided the functionality for you? Another favorite of mine is other people's code. When you can go out and leverage other people's code and how you can do that. And then finally, your own code. What does it take to take existing code that you already have and use it in a Metro-style app? Now, before I move on, maybe unlike some other sessions, I love questions. So if you have any questions during the talk, feel free to come to one of the microphones and ask it. If it's a long, rambling answer, then I will probably save it till the end and have you come talk to me. Otherwise, there's probably other people in the audience that have the same question in mind. So feel free, if you have questions, come up to the microphones and ask. So leveraging platform features. The way I think about this is, of course, the best code is code you never have to write in the first place. I laugh. I have to tell you a story of why I'm laughing at this. Back before I joined Microsoft, I lost count of the times I've been to a Microsoft conference or Microsoft event, and you're a developer, and it's a developer event, and the demo they show you, dragging a bunch of stuff in Visual Studio, and then at the end the payoff is, and I didn't write a single line of code. Right, how many people have experienced that? I'm a developer and you're telling me I didn't write a single line of code? Thank you for telling me that my job's, going out. That's not what I'm talking about here. So this is really about don't write the stuff that's already taken care of for you, because that gives you the time to focus on the things that are more important. You guys have actually seen this demo quite a bit, I'm sure, by the end of the week. So I'm going to make it quick. Ooh, Windows letting me log in. That's exciting. Okay, so I'm going to open up the Memories app. How many people have seen this app this week? Okay, a significant portion of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new album. And in here, let's select a photo. Let's add some media. I love that. Add media. So I can, of course, choose photos from my local hard drive. That's not unexpected. But the thing that I love most is by leveraging these contracts, like the file picker contract. Now, even though this app knows nothing about social networks, because I have an app installed that does know about social networks, like Socialite, I can go ahead and pick an app directly from here. I heard talk scores get infinitely better when cute children are shown. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a photo of my two boys. And very simply, if I'm the author of the Memories app, I never had to write any code whatsoever to plug into social networks. I can share to social networks, I can pick photos from social networks, I can do all sorts of stuff like that, and it's really cool that as you install other applications, your app becomes more powerful. And to emphasize, instead of smoke and mirrors, I'm actually going to show you the code for that app. And the line of code that opens up that file picker, just a new file open picker, you can see it doesn't say, and these apps, or grab these social networks, use this code. It's our built-in file open picker, and because that other app, Socialite, is using the contract, then your app automatically lights up and gets that functionality too. So if you're building an app that you want to share stuff out onto a social network, or pick photos from Flickr or Facebook or something like that, you don't have to write that code. If you already have existing code, I have to admit it, I don't know why I feel this way. But as a developer, how many people in the room as developers love nothing more than getting to delete a bunch of code from your code base? Okay, I'm not alone. That's good. Okay. So, coming forward, building a Metro-style app, when you can leverage these contracts, leverage them. It's code, once again, that you're not going to have bugs filed against you. You're not going to have performance complaints about, all that kind of thing. Code you never have to maintain because the apps let it light up. Okay, let's go ahead, switch back to the PowerPoint. So once again, I've said this a lot already, let the platform do the work for you when possible. It's kind of the number one area of code reuse, or frankly, code no reuse. The code you don't have to bring forward into the modern world. Some content for more depth. These slides, of course, are going to be available online along with the session, so if you want to dig into more of that contract stuff, here's some pointers for you. Other people's code. I often refer to this as the stand on the shoulders of giants thing. And once again, if code already exists that does what I want to do, why not use the other code that already exists? Great example. Yes, I'm a Microsoftie on stage, and I'm about to talk about jQuery. So this drum sequencer I'm about to show you that we built is what we refer to internally as a hybrid application. The front end, the UI, is all HTML and JavaScript. The sound generation is all done in C++ with Xaudio 2. Now, to take it a further step, like I'll show you in a minute, the front end, being a web developer previously in my life, I have a lot of skills already invested into jQuery, jQuery UI, jQuery templating, all that kind of stuff. So why learn a different framework? Why learn all that kind of stuff when I can leverage that stuff directly in my app? So let me go ahead and pop over and show you a drum sequencer that we built. This drum sequencer is now available up on the Dev Center in the SDK samples, a user-submitted sample that I submitted. So if you want to search for, I think it's called Groove or Drum Sequencer, you can download all this code yourself to play around with it. So let's pop over here. I'm going to show this to you first. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Okay, it's building, it's deploying, and it's going to be a fun little app that we're talking about here. Okay. So caveat, the reason I built a drum sequencer, I'm a musician outside of work, so I consider myself a music geek as well. So let's just go ahead and build this. Let's do it. So it has all of the features that you would expect, where you can mute sounds, you can solo sounds, you can adjust levels, like I can mute the snare and it goes away. I can solo just the bass drum, adjust volumes, all that kind of stuff, including going to other patterns and all that kind of stuff. Let's actually adjust the volume here. I don't want to drive you guys insane before my talk's even over. So this front end, all the stuff you see, the sliders is jQuery UI, using the slider control from jQuery UI. All the CSS changes that I make for like the strobing lights that are going across and at the top, that's all done via jQuery. And to prove that to you, I'm actually going to stop this and go back into the code. Let's go ahead and stop this. And you can see one of the things, I first just created a template that, let's pop in here and show you first in the HTML. So in these lines, you can see I've just gone ahead and grabbed jQuery 1.6. I've grabbed jQuery UI for the slider control. I've grabbed jQuery templating because I'm using templating to render that UI. If we scroll down, you'll see some of my templates down here. At the bottom, you can see the various templates that I'm actually using to generate the stuff. Now, I'm still using some of the features that are in Metro style apps. I'm still using grid layout and that kind of stuff just because it makes my life easier. That's one thing I want to do. But then I can leverage jQuery freely. And creating the template, what I did is in the JavaScript, we can see here that we have our entry point, essentially what equates to an entry point for our HTML app. And then as soon as we're in that entry point, if I continue scrolling down, you can see I'm just using jQuery freely. And everywhere throughout this JavaScript, just doing jQuery whenever I can. So that's an example, taking someone else's code jQuery. The other exciting thing about this, I didn't modify any of that jQuery code. There's no smoke and mirrors where I'm going, okay, I grabbed this jQuery code, but I had to make a couple changes to get it to work in Metro-style apps. That's not the case here. This was literally jQuery code grabbed off the jQuery site, thrown directly into my Metro-style app, hitting F5, and then it's just running. It's JavaScript code, it works. A lot of code is just going to naturally come forward into Metro-style app world. Okay, so let's go back here to the slides, actually. Whirlwind tour, I told you. Some other points around HTML apps and all that kind of stuff. But let's be honest, we're all devs in the room, we're all engineers in the room. There's always a counterexample. How many people have already tried to port existing code to Metro style? Okay, a couple people in the room. Were you guys successful without a single line of code change? No. No, I'm seeing no's. Because while a lot of code, especially in HTML, JavaScript land, is naturally going to come forward, you have to realize when you're talking about .NET and C++, there are some changes that need to be made. To emphasize that, how many people have heard of the open source library Node-A-Time from John Skeet? Oh, look at that. I see a couple people. So this is a fantastic library where doing date manipulation, date calculation based on different calendars globalized throughout the world is a very difficult problem. It's not something you want to solve yourself. John Skeet has this library Node-A-Time, which is, let's see if I can do a play on the Windows messaging, is a reimagining of Joda time in the JavaScript world. That's absolutely fantastic. But what I want to do is let's go in and bring Noda time into a Metro-style app. I'm going to grab Noda time here. Let's go ahead and build this. Look at all those. iClonable could not be found. Serialization could not be found. Resource set could not be found. Overall, 18 errors that I have to deal with. So that's obviously not a simple recompile away. So why is that? I mean, why? I know some of you are already thinking, why make my life more difficult, Mr. Microsoft? Well, let's talk about that. From a development of Metro-style apps, the Windows SDK enables a simplified developer experience. We've done a lot of really hard work with the Windows SDK to really remove some of the cruft that may have existed before. We're getting rid of legacy APIs. We're getting rid of situations where there's multiple APIs that did the same thing. And caveat, when I say Windows SDK, I'm obviously including the .NET Framework here as well, .NET Framework 4.5 and the Metro-style profile. So while that's great for new developers, there's one way to do things. You know, a lot of the cruft is removed. For all of us devs in the room that are wanting to reuse a lot of existing code, it presents, you know, some challenges for us. You know, some code's not there. I have to make changes. You know, oh my goodness, this was removed. What do I replace it with? Kind of things. So to drive this point home about this simplified developer experience, in the Windows SDK for Windows 7, there were right around 50,000 APIs included in that. For the Windows SDK for Metro-style apps in Windows 8, there's about 5,000. That's a huge reduction and a lot of effort Microsoft has gone through to kind of pave the way, get a fresh start, and provide the simplified developer experience. So what are the kind of changes we actually have to make in Noda time to get this to compile? For lack of time, I'm actually not going to do them all exclusively, but I want to give you a flavor of some of the things that we have to do. So let's just tackle some of these. I'm going to go to iClonable. Okay, watch how simple this is. This is another thing I love. You want to correct iClonable? Bam, it's corrected. Bam, it's corrected. Okay, Christoph Swalina is giving a chalk talk. I think after this talk, I think it's called something like a .NET developer's perspective on Metro-style apps or something like that. He's going to go into great details on the rationale and decisions behind these changes. So if you want to get into some of the details there, go to his talk. He's actually one of the guys that led this effort, so he's a great person to talk to. Now, we were able to delete iClonable because of the way it worked before. It was kind of, you know, somewhat compiler magic. It wasn't strongly typed and all that kind of stuff. So the clone methods actually still exist on the object. Serialization info. Yeah, let's just delete that. I'm sure you all are, those of you that like deleting code, I'm sure I hear chuckles like, ooh, yeah, I'm loving it already. So reader writer lock slim. No, we're not going to delete it. We're going to change it to reader writer lock slim. And then there's some API changes that you have to make when you switch over to reader writer lock slim. I'm going to give you just an idea of one of those because it's really a different pattern where we're talking about instead of acquire, access lock. We're going to say enter upgradable, read lock, and then there's some other changes that you make where you enter write lock and that kind of stuff. I don't want to go into details because it gets kind of mechanical in this way. So that's another example. One of the other ones, especially if you're doing serialization work that you need to know, yes, I did delete that serialization info. What we're going to do there is instead of that the older serialization mechanism, we're going to use data contract and then data member on our public internal types and that kind of thing. So those are the type of the changes. Now, how many .NET developers are there in the room? How many of you do resource management, resource resx kind of stuff? Okay, so how many of you have heard any information about the Windows 8 plans around resource management this week? Okay. So one of the caveats, this is one of those gotchas that I talk about, is Windows 8, the resx stuff in .NET has been superseded by the Windows story. And one of the things as .NET developers you need to be aware of is that currently in the developer preview, the Windows 8 resource story is strings only. So in the case of this library, it's doing a lot of binary stuff. Well, that stuff isn't supported in the Windows 8 model yet, so you're going to go back to strings, take a step back, do that kind of changes. So that's one of the caveats to be aware of when you start building, when you start building Metro-style apps. There's a whirlwind of things that we need to talk about. Okay. So let's actually dive into some other stuff here. So obviously the use of jQuery and jQuery UI, jQuery templating, all that kind of stuff, you can imagine maybe I want to use CoffeeScript as a language or various other jQuery libraries that are out there. I can grab them, or JavaScript libraries that are out there. I can grab them and use them. A lot of them, I can grab them and use them as is. .NET code, C++ is the same way. There's some things you need to know about. Actually, I'm going to pop back and show you a tool. I wasn't going to show you this, but we're all geeks. So I'm going to give you one little tip here. So how many C++ devs, or should I say developers who have to work with C++ code are in the room? Okay, there's actually a fair number. One tool that you want to be aware of when we're in this new world, I'm going to go into the Windows Kits directory 8.0 where the SDK is installed. Software Logo Toolkit. Now I'm not going to run it right now because it takes a bit of time to run. Let's actually show you what I'm talking about. Software Logo Toolkit under where Windows Kits are installed and program files. There's this wslkui.exe. Now, if you run that tool is going to run all the same checks that the store is going to run during upload. So when you upload your app into the store, this is applicable to C# and HTML, JavaScript developers as well. Is by running this tool, it'll analyze your package that you have installed, and it'll report any essentially invalid things that you're doing that would normally reject your app from being onboarded onto the store. So this isn't, a process. It's not the wizard behind the curtains. We're making this tool available so you can run it along your own apps and against your own apps and see every single line of violation of why that application will or won't be accepted into the store. So that's one quick tip of what you can actually use to kind of help that process of figuring out what does or doesn't work. So some more content. How many of you were at Harry Pearson's and Jesse Kaplan's talk on using Windows Runtime from C# and Visual Basic? Oh, wow, not that many of you. The rest of you in the room, especially .NET developers, make sure to grab that session online. That's an absolutely fantastic session that'll, especially if you have any confusion around Windows Runtime, what it is, what it isn't, how it relates to the CLR, all that kind of stuff, make sure to watch that session. That's a fantastic session. We have using the Windows Runtime from C++ and some labs that are available to you. So reusing your own code and exposing it via the Windows Runtime. This is one that I've been writing code for Metro-style apps, I would say probably 8 or 9 months now, so dog-fooding our own bits for quite a while. And there are definitely some tips and tricks that you might want to know about. So one of the first things I think about is, okay, I have some code. This is applicable whether you're in .NET or C++. I have some code that I want to expose via the Windows Runtime. Perhaps I want to call it from a different language or what have you. How do I go about that? Well, I think about there being 2 ways to expose your code. One thing that you can do is make all your code, essentially WinRT code, WinRT components, And that does two things, or two things that you need to be aware of. One, as soon as it's a WinRT, first of all, you have the fact that it's a Metro-style library, so it has to compile against the Windows SDK for Metro-style apps, so that restriction of APIs that are available, all that kind of stuff will apply to you. And the second thing is, since you're exposing it as a WinRT component, then it has to adhere to the Windows Runtime Type System. For C++ developers, this means you can't return or accept native types in methods like wstring or perhaps shared pointer stuff. You can't do that because other languages know nothing about that. If you're a .NET developer, it means that you can't accept and return open generics, things like func of t, stuff like that, that isn't in the Windows Runtime Type System. So especially if you're sitting on a very large code base, making the entire code base truly WinRT components is a lot of work. And it may not be what you need to do. Now, the way we went with the drum sequencer is this other way of presenting code via WinRT components. And that's this idea that you create a facade, really, that exists around your code, a very thin veneer on top of your code that exposes just the functionality you need via Windows Runtime. So if I'm, like in the case of this drum sequencer, I expose a component that essentially has methods like start, stop, set notes, that kind of thing. But I didn't expose, or I couldn't expose, like the audio engine, because that's using Xaudio 2, it's all native stuff. So I can't expose it to be used from JavaScript or C# or anything like that. So you can build this thin veneer facade over your existing code base, exposing just the stuff you need. And the stuff under that just then only has to adhere to the rules for the Metro-style Windows SDK. So that kind of stuff remains native .NET code. You don't have to adhere to the Windows Runtime Type System, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very simple kind of either-or that helps your decision making. There's some other things we'll talk about that you need to be aware of after I show the demo that will also affect your decision on how you expose this stuff to Metro-style apps. Okay, playing dynamic audio. This is the juicy stuff. Okay, .NET developers, don't be too upset with me. This is a lot of C++ code I'm going to show, but it's the new C++ syntax. So frankly, it's not going to be very foreign to you. And many of the things I'm going to show you and discuss with you are going to apply directly to .NET code as well. Okay, so let me go ahead and open, go wide magnifier. I am going to open, let's see, I want Groove Begin. So I have, over here, I'll show you where we're at right now. I have this Groove project, which is a Metro-style HTML app. In the same solution, I have a C++ project, which contains audio engine, drum sequencer, a metronome, all that kind of stuff that empowers this drum sequencer. So what I'm going to do is I want to essentially just expose the drum sequencer to WinRT so that it can be called directly from our JavaScript. So I'm going to start using, I'm going to change this to use the C++ CX syntax that was introduced. And this needs to be public ref class. I'm going to make this sealed. And of course, in public methods, we can't have native types. So this wstring star, I'm going to have to change to the WinRT type system to have platform string. Let's go ahead and compile that. OK. There is some demo hiding that's here. I've already changed the backend C++ code. Obviously, you can't just change wstring to platform string and have everything continue to work. So I've already changed that code in the background. So build succeeded. Now, this is perhaps my favorite step. I'm going to right-click. Let me do this so people in the back can actually see this. Groove, in my HTML app for references, I'm going to right-click, add reference. And in the add reference dialog, I'm going to say solution, and check that out. Groove components, my C++ project is available as a reference to add from my JavaScript project. So I'm going to add that. So now it's added as a reference. So essentially, I have my HTML JavaScript project that's referencing the C++ project directly. And that'll allow me to use it directly from JavaScript. So let's go over to our JavaScript code. And I'm going to create the drum sequencer in here. So it's in the coding coda.groove namespace. I'm going to create that drum sequencer. Let's go ahead and run it. Larry's in the room, I know, and he's Larry Osterman, a fellow on our team, and he's probably already thinking, Jason, I know where this is going to go. Yeah, you're right, Larry. So I hit F5. Whoa, look at all that stuff. That doesn't look right. And that definitely doesn't work. So let me show some of the things we had to do. You kind of have to know what's going on here. So in the case of the drum sequencer, it can't find coding coda.groove. And the reason, let's pop over here and groove end, is this is the one that's working. And notice the difference. I have Groove, my HTML app, and you'll notice in this project it's called coding coda.groove. In the other one, it was called Groove Components. Let's stop this. Hey, stop. Okay. So it was just called Groove Components in the other one. Come here. There's the other one. There we go. So it was just called Groove Components. When in JavaScript, when the JavaScript engine wants to create a new WinRT component, we say this new coding coda.groove.drum sequencer. In the WinRT world, it needs to find the metadata files, these WinMD files that describe the application that's there. So what's happening is the JavaScript engine is coming to Windows. Yes, question.
Are you going to address the other way, .NET applications wanting to get at WinRT functions?
Yeah, well, the great thing, so that's actually one, come up and see me offline. That's a little different question because the .NET code, if you're writing C# code, to get at WinRT functions that are built into Windows, it just works. Windows dot blah, 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 and you can start using them. The same way, same things I'm showing here, where if you have C++ code and you want to get at this WinRT component from the C# code, it's the same thing. Where in a C# Metro style app, you add a reference to your C++ project, and it adheres to the same rules and these same caveats that I'm about to explain.
So that I'm clear then.
Yeah.
So, for example, like the camera API or, the camera API, if I have a classic .NET application, I want to reach in and only code 2 lines of code to get at the camera API.
Yeah, that just, as soon as you create a new Metro style app in C#, you automatically get that stuff for you. One thing, classic app, classic .NET app. Let's take that one offline and answer it offline, because that's a more beefy question that I need to go into some more detail. Okay, so the JavaScript runtime, what it's doing here, coding coda.groove, it's coming to Windows and going, I need a metadata file for coding coda.groove. So Windows looks in the directory for coding coda.groove.winmd. It doesn't find it, because with the way we named our project, it's currently named groovecomponents.winmd. So then it's going to go, okay, you didn't have coding coda.groove, give me coding coda.winmd. Okay, it's not there. So then JavaScript doesn't know how to create the object. So to correct that, what you have to do is then, if we go back to our end project, is here in Groove, then you can see we've changed the project name to coding coda.groove, added the reference, and now because the project name is the same as the namespace contained within, now it'll resolve and find that stuff. This is the caveat of this is a developer preview. If you really don't like this experience, please let us know on the forums. We're definitely looking for feedback on this kind of stuff because we want your guys' feedback because you're going to be building these apps. So if there's something that you would like changed or improved, please let us know by all means. So now we've actually got this in this version of the Groove End compiling by doing this kind of stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a different thing. So we want to come in here and add an event that can be called. So I've added this delegate for ticked event handler. This is essentially going to be fired every time a beat happens. And you can imagine if this was C# code, the syntax is actually pretty close. Here I have an event that's of that type delegate called ticked. And in the CPP code, I'm going to scroll down here, remove the scary stuff that might scare you, because I know it scared me. I'm going to actually say this.ticked, and let's pass in current tick. So now we're firing that code that's going to fire the event. And in our JavaScript here, we just need to listen for it. So here I've added code that the sequencer.addEventListener, I listen for the ticked code. So now we're having an event that's firing from C++ and is being handled by JavaScript code. Let's run this app and see what happens. So I'm going to go fire this up. It's going to build since we made some changes here. Deploy succeeded. I always like to see that. Okay. So let's go ahead and start this and see what happens. Okay, wow, it just disappeared on me. Did everyone see that? Oh, so silent failures. That's, yikes. That's not fun. Let's find out what happened. I'm going to set a breakpoint here. Let's fire this again. We obviously want to know what's going on here, because that's not good. It's silent crash. That's kind of hard to debug. So I'm going to hit start, and let's go hit that. We didn't even hit our breakpoint. So what is going on here? Another caveat, this is one of the tips and tricks you need to know about. So here I'm going to go into debugging. Script only. So even though I set a breakpoint in my C++ code, only the script debugger is running. Well, that would explain why I didn't hit the breakpoint in my C++ code. So I'm going to come here. Let's hide this. Let's bring down these options so you can see this. So we have mixed for managed in native, script only, and managed in native only. Currently in the developer preview, there's no way to attach both script and native or both script and managed debuggers to the same process. So let's actually change to native only. Now we're going to be able to hit that breakpoint. So I'm going to hit F5 and actually show what's going on here. Deploy succeeded again. Man, look at that. It's a developer preview. The stuff might work, folks. So let's try this again. Okay, we hit our breakpoint. Let's step past this. I'm just going to F5 it. Ooh. So, a lot of very useful information we're providing you. Unhandled exception at, oh yeah, I get it. It's that place. I know exactly what that is. Okay, so I've debugged this before to save you the pain. Of the .NET developers in the room, how many are XAML developers? How many of you have ever tried to update the UI from a background thread? How many enjoyed what happened when you tried that? Okay, so we're actually doing the same thing here. That drum sequencer is using the thread pool where we have that metronome, so every tick that's going by, it's tick, 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 tick. That's getting fired on a background thread. On that background thread in C++, we're raising the event. And then we're trying to handle it from JavaScript. JavaScript says, buddy, nice try, go somewhere else. So we need to correct this now. And really the good thing is if you're used to XAML and dispatcher invoke and everything, it's a very similar model. And almost the exact same model with a couple little different changes. So what I've done here is I have this Windows UI core window, which is in this new Metro style world. This is kind of the new window object that you're dealing with. So I have that core window, and then in my CPP code up here, actually do it in a different place, in start. When the drum sequencer is started, I actually capture the current window that is running. So now I have access to the window, and the dispatcher is on the window. So let's go down to this code. This is where we get into the fun, geeky code. How many people in the room consider themselves geeks? Okay. I didn't call you nerds. I know the deal. Man, first time my wife called me a nerd. Woo! We're still married though, folks. It's okay. Okay, so let's do this. So we have that current window. Let's go to our current window, get to the dispatcher. And so I'm going to invoke on the dispatcher so that way it gets me back to the correct thread. I have a core dispatcher priority. Dispatcher priority. Normal. Next, I need an invoked handler. So let's create an invoked handler. And I know the pattern for this. How many of the C++ developers in the room have used C++ OX? No hands. So Herb's talk will talk about some of this kind of stuff. This is anonymous lambdas. So I'm going to use an anonymous lambda, which .NET developers have loved for quite a while. And I know the syntax is object sender and invoked handler args e. And here in that, go away, Solution Explorer. You're stealing my real estate. Ooh, I heard a phone. That's nice. Should it be like class where I take phones away when they ring during a presentation? Let's do that ticked and this current tick. Okay, now let's finish this out. I know I need a callback context of any. Now this is there, that callback context is there because that's what telling the dispatcher to say it's okay for that cross thread to happen. So I'm on a background thread, fire it back onto the main thread. I'm going to pass in this and null pointer for that last one. Yes, I want to stop debugging. Thank you. Let's fire that code now. Build succeeded, yay. Let's do it again. Deploy succeeded. Those are once again, my favorite words, folks. Deploy succeeded. We're going to see magic. Okay. So now let's go ahead and hit start. Now you can see it's ticking and it's all working. So the other caveat that, like we mentioned, that you need to be aware, just like in the XAML world, be aware of when that is happening, background thread, main thread, when you're updating the UI, all that kind of stuff. One of those other things to look out for that might get you. Okay, that's a lot of geeky code. I love it. Okay, how are we doing on time? Good. 45-minute mark.
I have a quick question.
Yes, absolutely.
So just sort of big picture, what you showed here, you
Yep.
wrote some C++ and consumed it in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying I could take my .NET library code, manage .NET code, and reference that in a Metro UI app?
No, it needs to be a Metro class library, because if it's a full-blown .NET Framework library, there's... Okay, so I sat down with a friend. You can try to get it to work, but then on store upload, it'll fail. In a Metro-style app, it all has to be Metro-style libraries, that kind of thing. So that way that you're playing into the same restrictions of the Windows SDK.
Okay, so then I'm still not able to use, like, I tried to convert some library code last night. I was using the web client. Web client doesn't exist in Metro UI, and now I'm trying to figure out how to
Correct. It has to be replaced with the WinRT APIs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that idea, the simplified developer experience, if there's only one way to do something, where if you're a new developer, that's fantastic. When you're trying to bring over existing code, it provides a pain point.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a chuckle. Is that because pain point is just, yeah, pain point. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Oh, another question.
So if this were a C# XAML front end, I think we would have done the dispatcher on the other side. Is there any reason we can't just have the JavaScript stuff automatically do the dispatcher for us?
This is a developer preview, and that's a piece of feedback we would love to hear. So I know I sound like a broken record. So if that's a feature that you want out of the JavaScript runtime, post it on the forums so that the JavaScript team can see that so it can go into our planning on the stuff we're going to do post-developer preview. Yeah. Okay. So to recap, you can use your own code. and expose it via the Windows runtime. We saw some of the things that you have to be aware of when you do that. Now, another thing I want to talk about really quick, be mindful on the amount of communication that's going to happen across that language boundary. So here I'm talking about between C++ and JavaScript. If I was in C#, I'd be talking about between C# and JavaScript. It might be between C# and C++. With how this is implemented, remember, we are crossing this language boundary. It is crossing a platform boundary. Like if you're writing C# code, calling it a C++ code, it's going to kind of cross out of the CLR and into native land, all that kind of stuff. So you need to be aware of how much communication is happening. It's really easy to take a direction where you build your WinRT component in such a way that now that interface, that protocol that you've developed is really chatty. There's a lot of communication happening, and performance is going to suffer because of the number of times you have to cross across there. So that's something when you're approaching this, you need to be mindful of as well, is how much communication is happening and be able to streamline that communication to, if you can, minimize the number of cross-boundary calls that actually have to happen between languages. So that's another kind of thing to think about when leveraging your own code and exposing it to Windows runtime. So here are some sessions for more depth. We got pointers to the Dev Center, some other sessions that you can go see online. So to recap, we talked about 3 different types of code reuse that we're talking about here. We're talking about leveraging platform features, know when you can let the platform do the work for you. We're talking about other people's code. Yes, I'm going to say it. Leverage open source when you can. Oh, this is recorded. Oh, damn. Sorry, boss. Or Sinofsky. I doubt he'll watch it, but hi, Steve. And leveraging your own code when you can. Get as quickly as possible to the point that you can provide value to your product, value to your app that your customers are going to love. If you don't have to reinvent the wheel, don't reinvent the wheel. Leverage all the things that you can and be ruthless about it. Ruthlessly leverage all the existing code that you can. Key takeaways. As I mentioned, let the platform do the work for you. Use other code that other people have written, and use your own code and expose it via the runtime when possible. And frankly, use the right tool for the right job. Caveat, I am not a C++ developer. I can be a C++ developer on TV, but that's not what I do for a living. But in this case, in the drum sequencer, because of other features in the drum sequencer, I need that direct access to the audio endpoint to do a lot. It essentially equates down to byte array manipulation. So the right tool for the right job is native code. So I use the right tool for the right job. If I'm developing a mapping style app, I will probably do it all in HTML and JavaScript, just because that's where a lot of the powerful libraries exist. The great thing about these language boundaries being broken down in Metro-style apps is that you don't have to say, I'm a C# developer. You don't have to say, I'm a C++ developer. You don't have to say, I'm an HTML JavaScript developer. You can say, I'm a Windows developer. And I will use the right tools for the right job whenever I can, which is a very powerful message and a very powerful thing to take to heart. Yes, question?
Sort of a takeoff on his question in terms of contracts and implementing contracts and providing either sources or sinks for contracts in background processes, Windows services, other things that go bump and are not Metro-style applications. How do you do that? Can you do that? Obviously you can because you've got drivers doing it. Where's the magic decoder ring on that one?
So currently in the developer preview, there's no way to communicate across process boundary within. IPCs aren't supported. This idea of connecting to another process, like let's say from a Windows service into a Metro-style app isn't supported. There's a couple things you can do. You can either go the web service route, or tell us that we missed the point and you want to see that kind of feature supported in this platform.
How do existing contracts work across from for instance, a television driver to something that wants to do a play to? Obviously, those hooks are there.
I got you. I actually don't have the answer to this. Come up to me afterwards. I'll give you my business card, so that way you can send me an email, and I'll make sure to get the questions answered correctly and be able, if anyone follows my Twitter at Jolson88, Whatever the answers are that I get from this talk, I will also post on there where possible. Yeah. Okay, I see another person sneaking up. Yes, sir.
Your drum sequencer, C++ code, you added that as a project there, but you didn't say what kind of project. Is that the DLL component?
No, it was, if you go into C++, it was a Metro-style library in C++. So under the C++ templates, there's actually a Metro-style library template. So it's not a regular DLL component. It's I think they may call it like Metro-style DLL or Metro DLL or something like that.
So is it actually compiled into the code, or is it?
Yeah, so all that is compiled into straight native code. So it still uses the C++ compiler, still compiles down to, in this case, x64 or x86 code, and is native through and through, compiled down, and is captured as a DLL in the package that is then deployed with the application.
Okay, so it is converted into a DLL.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that DLL is only accessible from the package that it's deployed in?
Correct. You can't access it from a different package.
Okay, there's no way to create your own COM interface?
No, not currently. That kind of relates to a similar question that he had. That kind of cross-application communication is done via the contracts, but if you want to build your own, it's not currently supported in the developer preview.
Okay, thanks.
Once again, piece of feedback, if you guys want to see that change or you really care about that scenario, post it on the forums or send feedback so that we capture that to go into our planning on a future release of Windows 8. So the ultimate takeaway that I mentioned at the top of the talk, do less work to get more done. Be proud of being a lazy developer. When you can leverage existing code, leverage existing code. There's nothing that you have to shy away from. Although it's a new platform, it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch. There's a lot of existing stuff that you can leverage to get up and running very quickly and very, very powerfully. So once again, feedback and questions. There's the forum link. There's session feedback. My Twitter is JOLSON88. So feel free to follow me there. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a while outside the doors. Thank you, everyone, for coming.